In late May 2019, we released our first ever documentary, an hour-long road trip deep into New England to learn more about what might be the most exciting brewing scene in the world. Whilst there, we learned there was so much more to it than juicy IPA, lobster rolls and queues for cans. In fact, we visited 5 completely different breweries that could claim to be the greatest in the world at what they do. So over the next few weeks, we're going to give them the coverage they deserve by using all the amazing stories they had that didn't make it into the documentary. Bissell Brothers were one of the big surprises for us. We'd had their much hyped DIPA Swish before, and been caught off guard by how balanced and easy drinking it was. As it turns out, balance is something that pervades everything Bissell do. It would have been easy to grow fast, produce a big Instagrammable beer, and start a cycle of hype that kept them growing. Instead, they've used their growth to diversify, investing not in more tanks, but more barrels, lagering vessels, and an absurdly beautiful taproom. If people were going to come and queue, founder Pete Bissell was going to make it the best experience he could. So I'm here with Pete and Alex from Bissell Brothers. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, yeah, thanks for coming in.
Not at all. It's such a beautiful space. I had no idea.
Oh, thanks.
It's pretty special. So you guys, I was going to say you are sort of younger on the scene of New England, but actually 5 years means you're probably one of the older guys now.
Oh, it's funny, yeah. You don't think of 5 as being a seasoned veteran, but things have changed so much since we've been in business.
Yeah.
There's a whole new wave of brewers in this state and everywhere that are, a whole generation of ideas and different takes on beer. So beer has not slowed down at all in our relatively what I thought was a short time being open. We've seen a lot, and we're continuing to see things change. So it's weird to be even considered an elder statesman in the scene.
At 5 years old, yeah. You guys started out on the Allagash,
That's right. Yep. It's called One Industrial Way, the Industrial Parkway. It's become synonymous with beer in Maine. It's been the starting place for a lot of different breweries, and with some great breweries still, that's where they've established themselves. And you've got Allagash right across the street. It's a fun little hub. You can get lost out there for an afternoon very easily.
Yep. Come away with a lot of merch, which is what we do.
Yeah.
So how long have you guys been in this space? It feels pretty well loved, well settled.
Boy,
we moved over here
coming up on 3 years. Is that right?
2016, we opened our doors.
Boy.
It took a lot of prep to get this place in order, but it was, it's almost 3 years.
Almost
now.
3 years, yeah. Unbelievable.
It's still so you're still on a 20 barrel?
We have a 20 barrel brew house, and our 10 barrel brew house is at our other facility in Milo.
Right.
So we haven't gotten rid of anything. We've just repurposed it. So that original brew house is still in service for the company, and then we doubled the size of the one here. So,
but it's still, for the amount of noise and the big reputation you guys have, 20 barrels is a little bit smaller than I was expecting. So you're still sort of really hands-on. And
I mean, we didn't rush to grow without really thinking about where this beer was going to go, how are we going to sell it. So I'm happy in that respect that we've taking it slow while continuing to grow and recognize demand, but to make sure that it's done in a sustainable way.
And it's not just about the quantity of the beer that you're putting out, it's about creating a company, which culture that you really love. If you take too many steps to grow too large, you need to hire people to do all kinds of different things. You might have a little bit of hesitancy to hire the right people or find the right people if you're growing too quickly because you have so many needs and demands that need to be met. We really try to emphasize getting a group of people together that really love each other, and it's a big family. We always say that. So it's another reason why we're trying to take it in a calculated, more conservative approach, while still putting out the maximum output while we're doing it. So I mean, demand has been huge, and I think something that New England's become synonymous with is sort of the lining up for your beer, which you wouldn't have expected 10 years ago, but now people want to come to the source and they want to get it here. How's that been to see people lining up, around the corner?
It was crazy when it first started at the original place. It was validating, I think, for a minute. But then it quickly shifts to, you don't want to linger in that space mentally. It quickly shifts to a responsibility to address that and to make, if people are going to wait for the beer, you've got an experience on your hands, and then it becomes, okay, what are you going to do with this experience? To give the customer validation, not just in getting this beer that they perceive as valuable, but to really make the experience part of it. And we think a lot about that, what's it like to stand in this line Yeah, we don't want to subjugate anyone or like, oh, these idiots waiting in line for beer. I would never do that. Like, I heard someone say that once that owned a brewery, and it's like, that's the wrong mentality, guy. Like, so it's not about kind of like blowing it off, nor is it about, oh, okay, like, let's drop a secret release and like, it'll be a huge line. It'll be good for photos. You know, that's kind of a juvenile move too, like taking photos of the line. We've done it back when it was still kind of very novel, but we've dealt with this for years. So I think there's an obligation to mature a little bit. But also, if these people are, you know, like, I'm not going to tell these people how to spend their time. We communicate our hours, our releases well in advance. If someone's coming down here 2 hours before, that's how they want to spend their time. And we should honor that and, again, work to not eliminate the line necessarily, but really make the whole experience really great. So I think the flip side of is trying to assume that you know better about how someone should spend their time. A lot of people really enjoy it. They enjoy getting something that people openly waited for. It's the same with other products. You see with certain clothing releases, like this isn't specific to beer. That's what I think sometimes people get pigeonholed, like, oh, it's just a beer phenomenon. No, it's not. Concert tickets, anything limited or with a perception of being limited is valuable to someone. And oftentimes they celebrate it. They want to get that end thing to say they got it. And that adds value to their lives and to themselves. And I don't want to knock that.
Is it still IPAs they're coming for, or is that getting a bit more diverse as you get more diverse as a brewery?
There's a couple beers that we release throughout the year that we anticipate high turnout for. Some of our bigger barrel-aged stouts, our fruited beers. We actually had the first release from a beer from our second facility here in Portland. It's called Seed. And people are familiar with the name. It's been released in cans for some years as a kettle sour. This was the first time that it was a traditional farmhouse ale, aged in wood for a prolonged period of time and then bottle conditioned. And people came out in a big amount for that. But mainly, primarily Swish. In the summer, there's usually a line on Saturday, regardless of the release. But overall, we're seeing that line culture go away slowly but surely as more good producers enter the market.
Yeah, there's more choice for you to go, so the line's been split between all these amazing breweries. See, the other thing that I've noticed from way across the Atlantic with Bissell Brothers is you've got quite a lot of session strength beer, which isn't necessarily something that you see a lot in American brewing. So stuff like Lux, which I'm having, which also has rye in it. Like, was there at the start, was there a plan to put some lower ABV beers out there? And
I mean, I feel like it's necessary. Noah certainly feels like it's necessary. You can unlock these flavors in this, you know, like this really explosion in your mouth when you use a lot of grain and you get a lot of sugar. And I'm talking about like some of the bigger beers that are popular. Those are great, but they're not practical. Like, I was just having this conversation the other day with someone here. IPA now, double IPA, occupies the same place in my brain as like a big barrel-aged stout, in that I don't drink it unless I'm on the couch in my sweatpants. I'm done with activities of any type for the day. And those are great. You know, I love settling in with a nice decanted Swish and putting a movie on. I love that. But we also, not just us here, but people in general drink beers when they're active. They drink beers when they're working on landscaping at their house, or if they're tinkering with their lawnmower, or if they're popping into a tasting room to meet some friends, but then continuing on their way. And some of these stronger beers, it's not as applicable to have a beer then get back to your day. So session beers, especially our lager program, have really become a big thing here. The decadence and the opulence of stronger beers are great, but everything has its place. And as you grow as a company, I feel like the need becomes clear to offer more of a variety.
Why do you think the brewing industry as a whole has been a little bit slow on that? Is it because it was a reaction against, you know, 4% quite shit lager? Yeah,
I mean, ABV sells. I think that's one of the several sort of identity crises that the industry at large has with itself. You know, we talk a lot about, as an industry, we talk a lot about sustainability and, you know, social issues and giving back, which breweries like ours have been put in an unprecedented position to act upon. You know, we're very active in our local community here. Alex is actually the director of community relations in terms of our impact on causes that we find important in the local area. All our charitable work is managed and sort of overseen by Alex.
Either will do.
But the fact is that strong beer and ABV sells. People drink beer because it tastes good, but also it's a social lubricant, it's an intoxicant. That's why we consume this. That's why it just makes life a little bit easier to live. You know, it's and I think the industry at large has a hard time accepting that. You know, we almost don't want to acknowledge it. It's like, this is why everyone's drinking it. This is why the industry's sexy. This is why brewing and tap rooms have this incredible allure and boom right now. It's a bar, and people go to a bar for socializing and the lubrication that an intoxicating beverage provides. So yeah, ABV sells. Hops with sexy names and the flavors that they add to the beer, that sells, you know? So definitely double IPAs and barrel-aged stouts and things like that are super important because they're delicious, but they also get you drunk.
It's almost like an exercise in just pushing the boundaries as well. I mean, it's just how big can we get this double IPA? How many hops can we push into it? It's like anything, you know, whether it's like, you know, building cathedrals, you know, or it's not, you know, how big can we get it?
Bigger
you know,
is better, and then
you, just to see what's
out
out
there. Once you push
there.
the boundary, you then find the right place afterwards because you've seen where you've gone too far.
It's
flavors that you get from a modern double IPA, like Here's to Feeling Good or Swish, like that is not going to go out of style anytime soon. It's absolutely delicious. It's otherworldly. You know, it's very, very special. So beer is diversifying at an alarming rate. Yeah. I shouldn't say alarming because it's a good thing. So you need to lean into lagers and ESBs, another sort of niche British style that we have on now. So it's exciting and dynamic. You know, I'd like to say, like, all right, we don't make beer for everybody. I don't think tap or producers should be focusing on doing something for everyone. I feel like now you got to kind of lean into your core group and make beers for them. But also there is something for everybody in terms of style at a place like this now, because that curiosity can't really be contained, and you need different strengths and sort of different styles of beer to appeal to different people.
And you've got a lager program as well, did you say?
Yep, those two horizontal tanks right there are lagering tanks. It was really helpful to get those because we don't want to, again, these beers like this are our lifeblood. We can't take up a fermenter that would turn a beer like this in 16 days for a 8-week lager. And at the same time, we can't rush lagers and put them out without the time that a beer like that needs. So we got dedicated tanks for that so that lagers can be lagering in those tanks at any given time and not impede our ale production.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting to see. I can't wait to see some more lagers and mixed firm coming out.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, because you know, Noah and the brew team, it's not getting put out unless it's to our specifications and to our quality expectations. So being able to drink these beers and sell them here, it's been really exciting. We're just 2 releases in, but there's going to be a steady flow of these products coming down here. It's awesome.
As a brewery, Bissell is stellar, but it's also a brilliant place to relax and hang out. By diversifying and avoiding becoming a canned conveyor belt, which would have likely made them more money, they have doubled down on supporting their local customers, and in doing so made it an even better place for visiting beer nerds.